So I would look at this sort of Bitcoin sell-off, this crypto sell-off we've seen this weekend as an opportunity as we move into October, which is historically the best month of the year for crypto. So that's the big picture perspective.
What's going on, guys? K-Dub here with another episode of Crypto Zombie. Welcome back to the channel. Hope you're having a great day today. Obviously, I thought today was a great day for me to make a video because you might be looking around the room and seeing gold hitting all-time highs, the stock market hitting all-time highs, M2 money supply literally through the roof, and yet Bitcoin is down about 11 to 12%, and some of the lower cryptos are doing even worse, right? Now, the more you look around on Twitter and YouTube, you're finding a lot of negative connotation regarding the Bitcoin and crypto space, saying that the top is in, a lot of questioning the 4-year cycle, which realistically, look, it either is going to happen or it isn't going to happen. We have different speculations as to why we could have an extended cycle or why we could not, but at the end of the day, we just need to look at what is in front of us, right? And I'll tell you guys, this is not my first rodeo, and when I first got into crypto, it was actually times like this that, I had to kind of question what was going on, and I often looked to YouTube or other places for information, and there really wasn't any, so I like to step in and kind of let you know what I'm seeing if you're new to the space. Now, I just want to show you on the chart really quick. We clearly have Bitcoin pushing below this area, right? Now, we had spoke about a possible head and shoulders pattern forming. It still could be in play, and even if this shoulder, was to come a little bit lower, for example, if you were to actually sort of look at this neckline, you could say arguably, if we adjust it, it is sloping downward anyway, right? So that's just sort of what we could extrapolate from the immediate chart, but could it get a lot worse? That's the question, right? Because a lot of people are out there saying, you got the cycle's over, we could go to 30K or lower, sell everything now. At the end of the day, I just want to break it down and have a look at exactly what is going on. So first of all, if we just look at this, I did mention that we had the triple witching or quad witching event, whatever it is that you want to call it. Now, this was last week, and we know that every single time this happens, we see massive volatility, and this time was no different. In fact, unfortunately, out of just the last 9 times that we did have this, only 3 of them were actually productive. Was this 9? 3, 6, 9, I guess 10. So out of the last 10 times, only 3 of them were actually positive. So this kind of was telling us that this was to be expected a little bit for Bitcoin and crypto. But the other thing that's going on is, why is Bitcoin deviating so much from this global liquidity? This should be injecting money into Bitcoin, but yet look how far. This is one of the farthest lags that we've seen pretty much since last year for Bitcoin, or really just for the ultimate chart for Bitcoin. We also have the heat map. If you look at it, we have liquidity stacked at 117K to 120, like Anoop points out, with a downside risk near 110 with a squeeze setup that is brewing. Now, that's exactly where we're sitting right now. We're pretty much sitting right there. So this would sort of be the moment where you would want to see that squeeze happen. If it doesn't happen, is that the end for Bitcoin? Well, I'm going to go over a bunch of things today. Hopefully by the end of this video, you will know exactly what we are talking about. And by the way, guys, just friendly reminder, if you do want to trade, I still have this Femex bonus going on. You can sign up for free. You don't even have to deposit anything, and you do get VIP status for a month. There also is $1,300 as well as an extra $4,000, which is upwards of, I think, $6,000, etc. You guys can check that out if you're interested. But I wanted to start with this interview with Matt Hogan. Now, what we're seeing right now, before we get into the video, before I start playing all these clips, is there's a few things that we have right now. We have the OGs, clearly, that have been selling. Right? We know this. It's proven. A lot of these guys, I'm not going to go into it again. They got into it for different ethos. Some of them became billionaires. They just want to call it a day. We've also seen some of the money sort of diminishing a little bit with these Bitcoin products that we've had out there, right? These DATs, so to speak. But at the same time, there's something else that's happening in the background that's actually worth mentioning.
Some of these companies are those so-called DATs, digital asset treasuries, that just buy Bitcoin for their balance sheet. Mackenzie is right that momentum is somewhat fading. But on the other side of the balance sheet, you have a broader set of companies that, just like individuals, want to have 5 or 10% Bitcoin. Companies like Figma, companies like Block. I still think that corporate number is going to double over the next year or so. The amount of Bitcoin on the balance sheets are going to go up. And I think there's an even bigger story in ETFs, where the flows, from my perspective, are set to accelerate strongly into Q4. So I am still feeling bullish about this market. I take this pullback as an opportunity and not a setback as we move into Q4. But more broadly, again, the big story in crypto is institutional adoption. That's still a trade that is gathering steam. So I would look at this sort of Bitcoin sell-off, this crypto sell-off we've seen this weekend as an opportunity as we move into October, which is historically the best month of the year for crypto. So that's the big picture perspective. On DAT specific, focus on the premier names in the space.
So again, if we're seeing all these companies putting Bitcoin on the balance sheet, shouldn't we see the price of Bitcoin moving a lot higher? Why is gold still stealing the show? Now, just to point this out, Bitcoin is up 700% in the same time that gold is up 90%. Again, I'm not going to say that the gold bugs don't deserve a victory. I mean, Bitcoin and gold, we pretty much stand for the same thing, right? We don't trust governments and banks, etc. But ultimately, I think we need to keep this into perspective. The other thing that's sort of worth mentioning is that you have this sort of lack of trust, right, in the dollar. And this is actually happening globally. Now, you could talk about politics and tariffs and all these other things, but at the end of the day, if you have a country, right, that wants to start moving away from the dollar, well, they can do their own currency, they can create their own, BRICS currency, etc. But most likely they're just going to start loading up on gold because, let's be honest, gold's been around for 5,000 years. Bitcoin's only been around for like 16, going on 17, whatever it is, right? So Bitcoin is still the new kid on the block, whereas gold is a mature asset. Bitcoin is a maturing asset. And I do believe over time that more, not only companies, but also countries will begin to adopt that as well. I do have more news on that later. So again, getting back to the M2 global liquidity and Bitcoin, what is going on here? Well, I wanted to obviously shout out Raoul Pal because he had done this video over here where he pretty much talked about what is exactly happening. And by the way, they were like the first ones to put that chart out. And I've never claimed that that was my chart, by the way, just to throw that out there. But, anyway, this is what he had to say.
And again, nobody really understands it because they're so superficial in how they look at things. We've always said things will deviate, things will change. Here's the 12-week lead. Since July 16th, 2025, we've seen this weird underperformance. And it was like, it's broken. It's broken. See, you are morons for following this. People start forgetting about it. We don't forget. You see, what has happened in the meantime is the Treasury General Account, that is the Fed, the Treasury, have been issuing bonds to top up their general account, which is taking cash out of the system. So they've withdrawn about 500 billion since July the 16th. That has hit risk assets somewhat. And of all the risk assets, the one that's most susceptible to liquidity is crypto. So crypto got that, which has been this choppy, it went up, alts have been outperforming, then they came back down again, and it's been just a bit sloppy. Nothing more than that. There's been nothing really adverse going on, just a bit sloppy. Top of the range for ETH, top of the range for Sol, tried to break out, came back down. Fine. But generally it's because they're sloppy because liquidity has been taken out very fast. The liquidity withdrawal stops about here. We're at the point where we don't need to withdraw any more liquidity and the Treasury General Account is topped up. Okay, so that negative thing has gone probably today, tomorrow, this week, next week, whatever. It's gone. And we start to see that liquidity will play catch up. Does it catch up to this chart? I don't know, but it always has done in the past. And I'll come on to the past in a sec. Okay.
The most crazy thing to me also outside of this, hopefully you got some value out of that explanation, but there's so much bullishness going on right now. And yet I've never seen people so unbelievably bearish. We've already had two 30% drawdowns in this bull run alone. This one's only around 11 to 12%. And for some reason, this is the worst one of all. I think it might be the psychology of Bitcoin lagging behind M2, behind gold. We got the Fed rate cuts. What's going on? We should be exploding. And that's the thing with people in crypto. We have this very short attention span, right? We want, even if it's big dumps, we'll take it, right? We just want big moves to the upside, volatility. And unfortunately, with the introduction of Wall Street institutions, it's starting to kind of play more like that game. And unfortunately, that is what everybody was rooting for. Now that it's here, this is what you get. And arguably, I might say that this is the worst bull market ever, but not really so much because of the market itself, just because of the sentiment around this boring price action, right? We're just not used to it. But look at some of these amazing things that have come out. We have US lawmakers asking SEC to implement President Trump's executive order opening the 12 trillion 401k retirement market to crypto. This is massive news. Nobody seems to care, right? We also have the US and UK have launched a joint task force to coordinate on crypto regulation. Now, regulation is a very scary word, especially for those who, I don't know what it is you want to be doing with your crypto, but I am saying that if you do want it to become more mainstream, unfortunately, again, there does need to be some sort of parameter, some sort of guidelines if these institutions want to play along. So take it with a grain of salt, but it's actually positive news. We have $645 billion Deutsche Bank report says central banks will begin to buy Bitcoin for their reserves this decade. So this decade, right, we only have 5 years, well, actually less than 5 years left of this decade because we're about to go into 2026. So, I mean, I don't know how old you are, but that's pretty bullish if you could just hang around for 4 years. We also have Ohio, just in the United States, saying that they're going to accept Bitcoin for taxes and state services. I don't know if anyone's watching from Ohio, if you've heard anything. That's pretty crazy. I don't know if I'd want to pay my taxes in Bitcoin. I'd rather pay my taxes in dollars. But hey, you know, that's pretty cool, right? That's some breaking news. We also have the Dutch government. I'm not going to play this video because it's not in English and I'm going to lose a lot of people who don't want to read the translations. But Dutch government has just urged to create the strategic Bitcoin reserve. I mean, come on, guys. Europe is coming. Europe is coming, says Vivek. What else do we have, guys? The last time Bitcoin's 90 realized volume was this low was the end of 2016. Does anybody remember 2017? I'll give you a hint. I'll actually, you could pause this video, you can open the chart, and you could see what happened. 2017, that was actually my first legitimate bull run. One of the craziest bull runs of all time. I heard the one before that was crazier. I wasn't around for that. But my goodness, 2017, wild times, okay? Definitely a different animal this time around, but I don't feel any differently about Bitcoin. Let me jump in and show you exactly why, and then stick around to the end of this video because I have a special clip to play you guys. For anyone who might be doubting, or I'm not saying you, someone you know, who's saying crypto's a bubble, it's about to have its .com moment, specifically Bitcoin. I'm just going to lay it out why that is absolutely ridiculous. And if we were going to have it, it would have already happened, or it would have already happened, essentially. So let's have a look at what we got in the charts here, guys. So pretty much what we have going on here is we have this massive, really, it's a bull flag. It's a giant bull flag. It's a consolidation period. We don't like when these things go down, okay? So yeah, of course, we do have the possible head and shoulders. Let me just clean this up just to show you, okay? This is really how clean this is looking. And you can see in the heart line, you get a little bit of resistance here. Then it acts as support. We have support at the bottom, resistance at the top, resistance at the top. I mean, this is damn near a perfect bull flag. I don't even know like how much cleaner it could be. Now you might be saying, well, what happens here if we push to the bottom? Well, if we push to the bottom, we literally just go down to the bottom range of the flag and most likely continue, you know, and realistically, something like this, what it actually does, I know a lot of people, they don't like to see things like that. They don't like to see lower lows, lower highs. But actually what ends up happening in these types of patterns is you have a better chance at having a more insane Bitcoin high. Because if we were to just blast off right now, if Bitcoin was to just go like 60, 70% right now, then the odds of a terrible, horrible market crash and a prolonged bear market are actually more likely. Whereas when you have these consolidations, it is more healthy. And look at exactly where we got that rejection. Right here. Look at the volume range profile, right? There was a lot of volume right here. We knew that this was going to be a very difficult area to break. Just because we didn't break it on, you know, this attempt, it doesn't really mean anything, to be honest with you. There obviously is something that could be a little bit concerning about Bitcoin, which I will show you in just a minute. But if we have a look, right, this is the EMA ribbon. It's a really simple indicator. It's free. You can literally just, you can just get it for free on TradingView if you want. And what we're doing right now is we're just sitting at the very top of this indicator. Now, what happens if we fall into some of the lower averages? Well, guys, look, this is the rally that we've had since the bottom, right? So right here, we had the inversion on the weekly. This is really where you knew the markets were starting to switch into the bull zone. A little bit of a fake out here, but right here, massive expansion, okay? So what did we have here? Again, this is what I'm trying to point out. Everyone's freaking out. Okay, back here in March of last year, we had a 34% crash that lasted 147 days. That was a rough time. And then what happened? We kept going. And God, by the way, guys, this is an uptrend. This is an uptrend. I mean, if this looks bearish to you, I don't know what analysis you're watching. I don't know what channels you're looking at. But okay, so we had this high right here. This was December of last year, and this went down 32%, and that was 112 days. Okay, so what are we doing right now? All right, so where do you want to take the peak? Right here. So this is about 12%, 42 days. If you want to go back to the first peak right here, you want to just say we can go here. Okay, what are we doing? Okay, this is 70 days. So, if you go out to something like 100 and let's just say 119, that brings you out possibly till March. Can you imagine if Bitcoin just went downwards and sideways until March of next year? I'm actually going to stop this for a second because everyone would be thrown off. First of all, what's happening to the 4-year cycle? Was that the top? Should I have sold? Why did it happen so early? Weren't we supposed to have a Santa Claus rally, right? So these are all possibilities. They may not even happen. We can wake up next week and have a full-on rebound off of this and go much more parabolic. But what I'm trying to say is the amount of fear that comes into these markets over 10, 12% moves. Sure, if you're in traditional stocks, that's terrifying, right? That's horrifying. In crypto, that's literally nothing. I think the reason that it feels more painful this time is because rather than those quick flash crashes we used to just have these really nice 30, 40% crashes, and a week or two later, we're back to the races. We're not getting those now. Now, we're getting these slow bleeds, these slow 25, 30%, right? And it's so boring, and it feels like everything is just falling to pieces, but it's the same exact thing. It's just slower. Really, that's all it really is, guys. If you have a look over here, these Bollinger Bands, the last 3 times that they got this tight, which by the way, if this continues, these are going to be the absolute tightest Bollinger Bands we have ever seen for Bitcoin. And every single time we have ever broken out of this area, what happens? Massive rally, massive rally, massive rally. So it really just comes down to patience. This is a monthly chart. I know people want to trade on these 15-minute charts. They want to trade these meme coins, right? Oh, I got in at 9 hours. It started dumping at 8 hours. Like, whoa, chill there, guys. Hold on. This is a long-term view. If you don't have that type of a mindset for this, then I don't know. Then I guess Bitcoin might not be for you, but Bitcoin really actually is for everyone. Let me continue on this before I start just rambling on. You could see we've had some support on the 21 EMA. Of course, this is an exponential. And of course, these right here are some of the most important, simple, nothing too complicated, right? You just have the 200, 150, and 21. And what you tend to find is that when you break or start riding on this area, you tend to break below it. We go into that sideways consolidation, and oftentimes we get bought up by the 50. The 50 is sitting at around $98,000 right now. And also, not to mention, we have been on this perfect upwards trend. And if you look at these Fibonacci's, you could see that the drawdown area is around 101, okay? But our next area would be 128, which really wouldn't be that much to break the all-time high. But the main area we've been looking at is the 0.3, which is still suggesting that there still could be, you could have a fake out down here. Look, we had multiple fake outs down here. We had a whole week of fake out down here. So it wouldn't be impossible for Bitcoin to go back to 101,000. But, obviously it's probably most likely going to end up at some point getting up to this level. Of course, I don't know when the actual market will end, but what I can show you is these downwards consolidation periods, right? I already went over the time frame, but look at this. And they tend to form these really nice parallel channels, which is pretty cool. So, I mean, you could see how long this went, right? How boring was that, right? And then what happened? As soon as you look away, boom. And what happens again? We start to go down, boom. And what are we doing right now? If this was to even follow the lengths of this, you could see that clearly there could be a lot more downtime before we get to this area. And this is the only sort of worst case scenario exception that I wanted to point out was we still have a CME Futures Gap that we put in way back in April of the beginning of this year. And in order to close that, Bitcoin would have to go down to $91,970. Now, we haven't had a Bitcoin price below $1,000. Ooh, let's see, for about 140 days. For 140 days, we have stayed above 100K. So that could probably freak some people out, if we actually ended up coming down here and then all of a sudden, we lost that sharply and then continued down. I don't know how we would, maybe we continue perfectly in this channel. I don't really know. Nobody knows. But there is a possibility that we close the CME Futures Gap. They have about an 86-ish, I believe, % chance of closing. But at the end of the day, if you look at the overall cycle, we're nowhere near these euphoria peaks, right? That you could see when we have all these indicators lining up. You can ignore the pi cycle top. I just put that there just as a reference, but it was taking up a lot of space on the screen. But you can see how that coincides perfectly right here with, for example, the NUPL, the Puel multiple, MV, RVZ, etc. Okay, there's a lot of them. This is a really, really cool indicator, by the way. And, called the top here. This is where we got overheated. And yeah, you're just not seeing it, really, arguably speaking, even though we are in a bull market, this is not even really a bull market for Bitcoin. Like, it's kind of a pretty weak one if you really look at it. If we switch it to the weekly, yeah, you could see once we start to get into these guppy zones, we stay there for quite a long time. That's these green levels right there. So until you start to see something neutral, I wouldn't really get too concerned about it. And I just wanted to end on this clip real quick. If there is anybody that you do think that thinks Bitcoin is in a bubble, there was this video. I can't remember who posted this, but it came out a while ago. Joel Baumgar, president of Prospera. So this is obviously not a new video, but I think that what he's talking about still makes a lot of sense.
Ladies and gentlemen, bubbles have three characteristics. They tend to be a single cycle, boom, then bust, relatively short in duration, and crash back down to the baseline, which is either zero or the inflation-adjusted place of where they were before the boom. The Dutch tulip mania was like this. So was the housing bubble. So was the dot-com bubble. And so was pretty much every other bubble ever. So what about Bitcoin? Well, Bitcoin, it's actually hard to see the price cycles because it's increased such radically in value over time. So we're going to use a logarithmic scale to look at what it looks like on a price cycle where you go from $0 to $1, then to $10, $100. It's called the logarithmic scale, which is often used for assets with this level of upside. So in the first price cycle, Bitcoin went from about 5 cents up to $32, back to $2. Now, if we were having this debate in 2011, you could be forgiven for believing it met 2 of the 3 criteria of a bubble, except that it landed at a price that was 40 times as high as the 5 cents that it started at. What happened next? It didn't go to 0. It went up to $1,200, came back to 92, meeting now none of the criteria of a bubble. Then what did it do? Well, it zoomed up to $19,000, down to $3,200, meeting, once again, none of the criteria of a bubble, 35 times the previous low price. Then it zoomed up to $69,000, down to $15,000, once again meeting none of the criteria of any historical bubble we have ever seen. Bubbles look like the bottom left of this chart. They do not look like the orange line. So what does look like that orange line? Well, it turns out every high value asset that has ever become a $1 trillion industry or asset looks just like that on a logarithmic chart. Apple, Amazon, Netflix, even gold, when you zoom out, goes through the same pattern. And all of these assets do it for the same reason. The marketplace is trying to figure out how big of a deal is this asset, how big of a deal is this industry, and what role will this commodity, technology, or company impact in the global world. Bitcoin's doing the same thing for the very same reason, which is the opposite of how any bubble in human history has ever behaved. So why is it valuable? Well, for the first time in human history, we have a borderless, predictable, and scarce monetary asset. So what do I mean? Borderless because Bitcoin is decentralized. It's not controlled by any country, company, or anybody. And that means Bitcoin is not like fiat currencies, which is nothing but a bunch of fiefdoms all over the world. And borderless because you don't have to have the government's permission to cross a border with more than $10,000. Bitcoin is a decentralized and borderless currency that is valuable because the world has never had a universal worldwide currency that worked like Bitcoin. Bitcoin is also predictable, absolutely, completely unlike the Federal Reserve, where even the experts get it wrong every time. And having a money that is absolutely predictable is a very valuable characteristic. Also, Bitcoin is scarce, truly scarce. There will never be more than 21 million Bitcoin, ever, as opposed to fiat, which is as infinite as a politician's promises.
Anyway, as usual, I've rambled on for way too long. I just wanted to put things into perspective. Look, it is a little bit different this time, right? And it can be upsetting when you're seeing things like gold and stocks and M2 surging and Bitcoin's just hanging out. But again, it's like you want it to decouple, but if it decouples negatively, that's a bad thing. It could just be its own animal, right? Bitcoin is still relatively new to the rest of the world, but I believe personally, just because I've been here for long enough, I've had multiple drawdowns. You know, I mean, there was a time we had a 50% crash. I remember when Bitcoin was $6,000 and it was like 48 hours, if not less than that. We went from 6,000 to 3,000. Now that might sound silly to you, right? I would have loved to have bought at 6,000. Right, everyone would have. But in that time period, okay, when Bitcoin fell to 3,000 and we just lost, you know, you just watch your portfolio 50% wiped out overnight, that can be a little discouraging, right? And what ended up happening? Well, I don't have to tell you what happened. We went from 3,014, had a little bit of the COVID, you know, fake out, and the rest is history, right? So these are just normal for Bitcoin. Look, people are going to take profits. People are going to rotate into something that maybe they think short term has a better chance of outpacing. Maybe now it's gold or silver or I don't know, maybe AI stocks. I'm not really sure. I don't follow a lot of that traditional stuff, but I do know that Bitcoin is looking super healthy, super awesome right now. It's just, it may not perform the way that people want it to for a little bit, you know? And for all those times that people are hoping, I wish I could buy cheaper, it sucks. I feel like I missed the boat. You know, I'm not rooting for Bitcoin to go below 100K, but it's not impossible. I just think if it goes down and it closes the CME Futures Gap, I don't think we're going to stay there for that long. And I think that that would be the generational opportunity of this potential cycle, right? I mean, I don't know when the cycle is going to end. I don't think the cycle is ending. To clarify, I'm not bearish. I just think that Bitcoin could just end up doing what it already did twice, you know, a boring 30%, whatever. Or we could wake up and it could just, I don't know, go to the moon. But I would be cautious on Bitcoin blow off top because, again, if we have some insane price action leading into the end of this year, that could be the trigger for the real sell-off that could see the extended bear market. So as boring as it is right now, I don't mind the consolidation. I don't even mind the price going down a little bit. The more that you build those bases, you're building the foundation, you're building, you know, the base of the house, the more that you spend time there, the healthier long-term it's going to be. And let's just be real. It also gives us more time to stack. So I don't see how anyone could be upset or bearish right now. But hey, I don't know. Drop your comments below. Maybe I'm completely delusional. I've been in Bitcoin for too long. It's time to wave the white flag and I should, you know, just move along. I don't know. Could be. I don't think that's the case though. Anyway, guys, that's it for me. Also, I'm just letting you know this. I can't stress this enough. Meta Signals is going to be burning their NFTs, which means you will not be able to get lifetime access to these alerts anymore. They will become a paid service subscription. So, you know, considering that these NFTs are denominated in ETH is cheap. It's going down. So, I mean, cheaper Ethereum prices could mean, you know, better potential prices to get in for this NFT. And like I said, this thing is going to be going away. You guys could watch this video. Check out all the benefits. There are some other things you can get in here. A lot of free indicators and trade alerts, etc. Also, if you guys want to follow me over on LevX, you can check that out. There's lots of bonuses. And of course, the VIP trial, which is ongoing for another 44 days. So that is it for me, guys. Thank you so much for coming back to the channel. You can check out all that stuff below. You can check out these links popping up right here, right now. You guys are awesome. Again, you know, by the way, if you showed up, thank you, because a lot of people are just gone right now. Like it's crickets lately. So if you're still here, you're the trooper. If anybody tells you you got lucky, well, we know the truth. All right. So guys, until next time, stay crypto. And of course, peace out.